The topic of homelessness among Aboriginal people is a topic that's complicated and goes much deeper than the surface issue of not having somewhere to rest your head or to call your home. Growing up, I was taken away from my mother. She struggled with addiction and was also taken away from her mother at a young age. This theme of a loss in structure and belonging is very common within Aboriginal communities and families. I personally feel that this is a direct result of colonization. I am a Métis individual, and my Aboriginal identity is something that I struggled with as my family is very dislocated. It seems we aren't specifically from anywhere, but rather have grandparents or great-grandparents who were settlers, who married women or had arranged marriages with women from reservations. My family in the more recent generation has grown up within the inner city and could be classified under the urban Aboriginal population. The loss of Aboriginal identity among many Aboriginal individuals has become lost as a result of colonial practices and policies. Being able to look deeper into the history of Aboriginal people in Canada has offered me a lot of insight and understandings as to why my family has become the way that they are, struggling with addictions, identity, and stability.
The stories I know have been so different in comparison to that of Jade's. I feel as though we've come from two different worlds. Learning the history of Aboriginal people in Canada and about Jade's story has really opened my eyes and intrigued me to be able to look within myself and challenge my own understandings. It's broadened my perspective and the ability to recognize the effects of intergenerational trauma and how these effects are all interconnected and affect the Aboriginal population in so many ways, including addiction, mental health, and homelessness. Learning about the hard truths of Aboriginal people was something that I never wanted to hear, especially because my boyfriend and his family, who are also Aboriginal, lived a different life than the stories I've learnt about. They are connected to their culture and can be considered successful people whose lives have been enriched through opportunity. The other side of the spectrum was something so foreign to me and something that I was unable to relate to. However, I'm realizing now that I can use this awareness and knowledge to allow me to reflect on what has happened and use self-location to help me understand how I can take part in reconciliation.
Alberta's 7 largest municipalities participate in a point-in-time homeless count every 2 years. The 2014 count showed a bleak picture of overrepresentation for homelessness within the urban Aboriginal population. This speaks volumes considering that Indigenous people make up for only 4% of the Canadian population. It's necessary that we ask ourselves why such a small percentage of our population makes up for such a drastic overrepresentation within the marginalized areas of society. In seeking answers, the literature review Aboriginal Homelessness in Canada suggests that any discussion on the Aboriginal homelessness crisis must include discussions about history and intergenerational trauma. Patrick, 2014.
We've all learned about the cultural genocide that took place in our country. The one that started with the colonial policies such as the Indian Act, established in 1876, that took away the rights in the land of the Aboriginal individuals, and initialized the systematic control of the Aboriginal population. We've learned about the residential schools that forced children out of their homes to assimilate and to Christianize young Aboriginal individuals. We've heard about the abuse that took place and the many people who were left damaged as documented by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. We've learned about the 60 SOWK that again was the forced assimilation of Aboriginal children, taking the children and leaving the parents behind and breaking the natural circle within the family unit.
It's important that we connect the dots and recognize how this overrepresentation of urban Aboriginal people who are homeless is a result of colonial practices and policies. We need to be aware that homelessness is merely a symptom of intergenerational trauma, like that of addiction, abuse, violence, and a loss of culture. It's imperative that we recognize the dislocation among the urban Aboriginal population and how it is sustained through systemic barriers within our society as a contributing factor to homelessness. Consider an entire nation of people who have continuously been taken away since the development of this country. Indigenous communities have been involuntarily uprooted and made to lose their homes, resulting in cultural disconnect, leaving them fragmented throughout society. The urban Aboriginal population has been left dislocated from their communities, their families, and from their culture. Recently, there have been suggestions by scholars expressing the need to expand our perspectives on homelessness, especially in regards to the Indigenous populations. They've introduced the concept of spiritual homelessness, which is a crisis of personal identity, wherein a person's understanding or knowledge of how they relate to their country, family, and Aboriginal identity systems is confused or lacking. Turner et al., 2010.
Aboriginal people have become spiritually homeless because of the dislocation they've experienced. To have no connection and to have no understanding of where you've come from, or the intergenerational trauma you carry, must be a burden that is heavy to hold. The inability to better your situation because systematic barriers, oppression, and the effects of intergenerational trauma can lead you to many places, one of them being physically without a home.
We wonder why there is this massive overrepresentation of homeless Aboriginal individuals, but the answers we are looking for are right in front of us. We simply have to choose to not only see, but to listen, and then to reconcile.